My sister-in-law Teresa used to work at a local dental practice. She had Wednesdays and Sundays off, which suited her down to the ground. I'd risen through the ranks in my company and had recently been promoted to vice president. I couldn't help but notice that the higher I climbed the ladder, the less I actually had to do when I got back to the office after lunch. I realized that there was almost nothing on my desk. I had a great team, and I trusted them enough to delegate the work I was responsible for. It's not rocket science. All you have to do is hire the right people and pay them enough to keep them loyal. As I paced around the office for the 100th time, it occurred to me that it was Wednesday and Teresa should be home. Why be vice president if I can't leave early sometimes? I told the secretary I was leaving and asked her to call me on my cell phone if I was needed. I hopped in my SUV and headed home. On the way, I thought about how surprised Teresa would be to see me in my 19 years with the company. I had never come home before 3 times. I was so sick I could barely stand as I pulled up to our house. I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway as I parked. I gave it another glance. It was one of those ridiculous-looking cars I thought was a Mini Cooper. Teresa had shown some interest in them, but I'd rather not be seen in one of those newfangled Volkswagen Beetles. I hate them. I opened the front door and listened to determine which room Teresa and her visitor were in. I casually inquired who had come. I heard nothing in reply. I went downstairs and heard some faint sounds from the bedroom upstairs. I went up the stairs as quietly as I could because I had a bad feeling. I even remembered to step over the 5th step, which always creaked. It was obvious that the sounds were coming from the marital bedroom and not me. There's a real problem in my house. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, so I crept closer and peeked into the room. What I saw was immediately imprinted on my brain forever. I could see the back of a medium-sized guy. He was completely naked and clearly had someone in his arms. Teresa's legs were wrapped around his waist, and her ankles were clasped together. The door was only slightly ajar, and I couldn't see anything else. The guy was medium-sized and naked. It was clear he was with Teresa. Her legs were wrapped around his waist, and her ankles were clasped together. The door was only slightly ajar, and I couldn't see much else. I stepped back and leaned against the wall, afraid I was going to throw up or pretend I was dead, as I tried to calm down. The guy started saying some nasty things Teresa would never allow. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew her better than that. Then I heard her moan in agreement. How could she do this to me in my house in our marital bed with some stranger? My first impulse was to storm in there and beat the guy up and then slap Teresa. My anger was scaring me. I'd always managed to keep my emotions under control to avoid legal trouble. This was the only time I was willing to go to the extent of breaking the law. Then I thought about my 2 children and my job. If I kicked her out on the street, she'd want half of everything. If I ended up in jail, I'd probably lose my job and she'd have everything. My brain returned to normal functioning mode, and I realized that I could always find this person and kill him. Teresa wouldn't be going anywhere if she thought I didn't. I knew her dirty secret. I felt like I had 2 choices: accept Teresa's infidelity and hope her affair would end, or take revenge. This has been a debate since Adam and Eve, but I didn't have a moral dilemma. I just needed time to plan. I left the house abruptly as I had entered, wrote down the bastard's license plate number, and returned to I drove to the local pub to calm down. I didn't drink, but I did get angry and moody. I felt completely alone. That made me angry. She had taken control of me. Maybe she's some kind of witch. I felt more controlled than if I'd been tied up hand and foot. How did this happen? Why hadn't I noticed any warning signs that my will was no longer my own? I hadn't even noticed when her affair started. I was happy as a pig in, well, you know, I thought she was too. It became obvious that the revenge plan wasn't going to be easy. She couldn't have any real feelings for me to do what she did. If I killed myself, she would laugh all the way to the bank. I was the one with no real power over her. I couldn't make her suffer. That's when the beer finally kicked in and clarity flooded my brain, dispelling the fog. Revenge didn't have to be immediate to be enjoyable. In fact, it would be so much sweeter that way. That's when the stupidest revenge plan ever devised by mankind was born. I began to smirk as I realized that the genius of my plan lay in, it was a pretty simple plan. I decided to be the perfect husband, friend, lover, and partner. I was going to have a firm grip on her soul, just as she had on mine. She was going to need me and depend on me, so that's what would really hurt her when I kicked her cheating ass to the curb. I realized it wasn't conventional wisdom to get back at an unfaithful wife, but maybe no one had ever thought of that before. I could probably write a self-help book and make a fortune off of it. I could write a book and make a fortune off it after I've had a chance to relax. I paid the bill and left. Beer was my best friend, and it was with me again. It's just that someone had set up a table right where I was trying to pass, and I knocked someone's mug over with my backside. I slipped on the spill after I got to my feet and told the bartender I was fine. I left again, but my consciousness didn't extend to my limbs, which had lost most of their sensitivity. The drive home was long and arduous. I almost got lost. I made it home without any problems, and I was ready to get started on my plan. Teresa asked me if I was okay. I said I was fine, thank you. Why do you ask? I explained that I had a couple of things to tell her. You're covered in dirt, you've got a bruise on your cheek, you're 3 hours late, and you're not looking your best. This is going to be harder than I thought. She was really good at it. My mind was racing as I thought about how to be the perfect husband. Do you want me to take out the trash, honey? I asked Teresa. She gave me an inscrutable look. Would you rather we go to the mall and buy you some new clothes? She stared at me like I had 3 heads. Teresa noticed the bruise. She took control of the situation by being so attentive and caring. I sank heavily into the chair. Teresa walked over to the sink, wet a napkin, and wiped my face, scrutinizing me closely. Her touch still gave me goosebumps. There were a few wrinkles on her face, but I realized she was even more beautiful than the day I married her. Back then, she was really attractive. She had gained a few pounds, but that just added to her feminine charm. I felt my heart start to beat faster as I watched her move around me, checking out my head and face. I reached out and ran my palm over her round buttock. Had she always been so tight and firm? Why hadn't I noticed how nice it was before I learned years ago that if you hit a man on the head and he develops an urge called priapism or something like that, he probably has brain damage? Teresa suggested, let me see if you... I'm attracted to you, Joe, she said, sliding her hands down my trousers to find a raging scene. Teresa quickly yanked her hand away and reached for the phone. I'm going to call an ambulance, Joe. I think you might have a head injury. It's like a rock in there and it's bothering me. My plan has already failed. Going to the hospital for this seemed a bad idea. I stood up and took the phone from her. I remembered her wrapping her legs around some guy that day, which made my whole plan fall apart. The beer was running out and I was getting angry again. I thought, a little fool like you, you'd think I'd have a better idea than that. I laughed. What did you say? Teresa was shocked. I'm 6 feet tall and weigh 185 lb, while Teresa's over 2 and taller than 5 feet and has never weighed more than 120 lb. I just picked her up in my arms and headed upstairs. Joe, you're not well. We need to get you to a doctor, she pleaded. Don't take it for excitement. I had to give her credit. Over the years, she'd given me several strange reasons not to have sex, but this one took first prize. I threw her on the very bed she had been playing on. Without me, a few hours ago, I realized she was probably worried that I'd find signs of recent activity on her body. She was dressed in a baggy shirt and loose shorts, so I simply reached out and pulled the shirt over her head before she realized what I was doing. Joe, you're hurt and need attention, she pleaded again. I'll show you what needs attention. I climbed onto the bed and began sucking and enjoying her breasts. I looked for bite marks or bruises. I found nothing, but I kept looking and sucking Teresa. She'd stopped complaining and was making strange, quiet noises. I took the clasp off her belt, unzipped and pulled down her shorts. She seemed to lift her ass to make it easier. She must have realized there was no turning back and decided not to resist. Her panties slipped down along with her shorts. I moved closer to look for clues. This woman was smart. I have to hand it to her. I found no trace of the guy who had slipped her his salami hours ago, but there was no soapy residue, just washed flavor. I felt the anger rising in me again. Joe, I don't know what happened tonight, but you were great. It was better than ever. Those names you called me and your tension got me so hot that I had to do everything I could. She do it for me? She grinned, then kissed me, and I hugged her, wondering how I could live without her. Then I saw the proof I was looking for in the corner, where the sheets that had been on the bed when she'd slept there were now. I set the trap. Honey, why is there dirty laundry on the floor? I asked as calmly as I could. I know you'll be angry when I tell you. I was pretty angry when I told her, honey. Teresa had warned me. Promise me you won't try to beat the guy up. My blood boiled again. Promise not to kill the guy who'd screwed her over. I was pretty proud of my cold-blooded demeanor, even after the effects of the beer had faded. I promised Teresa I'd do as she said. I told her I'd kill that bastard. I also told her I had to go to a seminar on how to fill out insurance forms at work. She asked if I'd told Louise I'd be gone all day. She has family problems. When I got home, she was in. We'd been drinking and sleeping with some guy she'd picked up at a bar. Teresa went on. She brought him here so Jack wouldn't catch her. My head was spinning. It wasn't Teresa who was asleep. It was her sister. I remembered her telling me she had to go to some seminar. I just never paid attention to it. Teresa still loved me and was not a woman. I remembered calling her that, and realized she must have thought it was just sex and nothing personal. I was really annoyed and asked them to leave. I don't know his name, and I don't think he's worth your time or trouble. Teresa assured me, stroking my cheek, that I seemed upset. I was really happy, as if a huge burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I grabbed Teresa and kissed her hard. My heart was breaking. You can't be responsible for every stupid stunt your sister pulls. I love you so much, I whispered in Teresa's ear. Then I heard the words that brought me back to earth and almost ruined my evening. I love you too, darling. I'm going to go online now and order tickets to the ballet.